Good afternoon. My name is Omolabake Olagunju. I am a senior program associate with the Creative Economy Practice, and I am based at the Lagos office. You are welcome to the Fashionomics Africa Accelerator online program. Today, we'll be covering revenue and pricing models in fashion. Kindly note that translations are available in English, French, Portuguese, and Arabic. We request that you look for the round interpretation icon at the bottom of the screen to select your preferred language. Welcome to today's session. And while you wait, please turn on your camera if you can and share in the chat what you are looking to get out of the session. Before we start, here are some ground rules. Switch on camera if you can. Use the chat box to ask questions. Raise hand if you want to say something. What we discuss here stays here. Mute your microphone unless you want to speak. Participate actively. Give space for others to participate. Please ensure that your Zoom name matches your registration name. This is for the purpose of taking attendance. Attendance will be taken anytime during the session. So again, we ask you ensure that your Zoom name matches your registration name so that you are not marked absent. Let me introduce to you our facilitator. I know she's not a new face, we have met her before, but I'll do another introduction. Meet Anne Macreed. Anne is an award-winning fashion designer with over 2 decades of experience in sustainable fashion and development in Africa, as well as earlier years in Europe. An expert who is widely recognized as a pioneer in the East African fashion industry. She's passionate about using fashion to create good jobs and build understanding between communities and across social classes. She also enjoys sharing her knowledge of design, business, and brand building with the next generation of leaders in Africa. She's the founder of Kiko Romeo and has spent the last 25 years building the Kenya-based unisex label into one of the most innovative fashion brands in the African continent. We are excited to have you here today, Anne, and look forward to a great learning session on revenue and pricing models in fashion. The floor is yours, Anne. You're welcome. Good to have you on this call, Anne.
Hi, everybody. It's just really wonderful to be here, to be back. I enjoyed the first session I did with you, and I'm really looking forward to this thing on costing and pricing. I think some of you know I prefer to talk first, and then from there, we can now go into the slide share. But I wanted to just discuss a few things first about today's class. We are always busy making our products, but sometimes as designers, we're not quite so busy accurately recording everything that goes into making the products we do. That also applies to services, because some of us as designers do service for other people. We may design for other people, pattern cut for other people. There's different services we do. So I want to look at a couple of things. We'll start with what I think is usually easier, which is the material costs. And I think in the WhatsApp group, I sent a brief paragraph, and I think you received a cost sheet. Now, the cost sheet, sorry, let me say, can you give me a reaction? Just put any kind of reaction, a heart, a thumbs up, whatever you feel like, if you have seen the cost sheet in your WhatsApp group. Yeah, good. Great. Now, I really simplified it because I wanted you to focus first on materials. I think when someone says, how much does it cost to make a product, we automatically think of materials. Sometimes we don't record the materials at the time of making the thing. Maybe we don't remember, we don't know, we're in a hurry. And then afterwards, we think, okay, what did we use? How much was it? And sometimes we can remember and sometimes we can't. Hands up if you're one of these people who maybe doesn't record at the moment of making something. Put your hand up. I'm one of them. Okay, I'm seeing Harriet, Miss Boo, Yampufu, Ngwani. So there are many of us. A tip for me was to find somebody in my team who was very good at asking me. So I would come back with this material and that material or buttons or something, and they asked me for the receipt, and then they looked at what I did with that. And they asked me afterwards, or rather, if it was a fabric, they recorded how much was left because they knew how much I had bought. Now we have systems. So we have a book that the person cutting has to record exactly how much they use and so on. But I don't know what it is about design businesses. As designers, we're so excited to make the product, and maybe the product is a sample, that we're not keenly looking at exactly how much materials we're using. So if you're like me, you need somebody in your team, whoever it is. Mine initially, when I had it, was very small and didn't have many employees. It was my house help. So whoever, she was just very good at recording household expenses. So I knew she would also be good at recording my business expenses. So find that person. It doesn't need to be a fancy person with degrees, accountants, whatever. If you have one, fantastic. But even that person who's going to buy milk, tea, and sugar for, you know, maybe they're good at recording. So find the person to work with you. Now, I want to share, I just want to make sure that the translation is okay. I'm seeing quite a lot of messages coming through. So I'm going to go through my slide share and we'll have questions as I go along. Don't think of this as something complicated. As I'm saying, the person who buys your milk and tea can also sometimes help with recording. And my person became my stock keeper because she was so good, she was able to do that. So let me switch on to my slide share and we discuss a few things that maybe some of you remember and maybe you don't. Let me put it on right now. So you've already seen me and you already know the rules. So how much does it cost to make a product? This is worth spending time on because if you get it wrong, then you have a very wrong idea of how much money you're making. Maybe you're actually losing money, not making money. So let's try to keep it quite simple and come up with the cost of one of your bestsellers. I'm going to ask the organizers if anybody has completed a costing sheet for their best-selling item, hopefully in dollars. Could you please WhatsApp it to me and I can refer to it? Otherwise, I'll use my own. So the kind of common mistakes that designers do when they want to cost a product or price a product. They feel sorry for their clients. Now, why might they do that? In my experience, when I started selling, I was often selling to my friends and colleagues from work before. So I was identifying with them, I knew them well, I knew their personal stresses. I knew how much they were earning in many cases. And I put myself in their shoes and I thought, oh, poor them, they can't afford it. I have to put the price down. Can I have a reaction? Anyone do that? Do any of you feel sorry for your clients? So when you've made something, you actually think, oh, they won't be able to pay for that. It's too expensive for them. Okay, I can see some hands. A second thing is lacking confidence. Maybe you're new to the profession. Maybe you are actually, people say you're good at what you do, but you don't have a certificate because you didn't go to design school. Maybe just as a character, you have been told at home, or you shouldn't be doing this, you should be a doctor, you should be a lawyer. Like, why didn't you go to school to do that? So all of these things combined mean that you lack confidence to say, what I make is really fantastic and someone's going to value it. And you forget that you find it easy to make that thing, but someone else doesn't. But you lack the confidence because of all of these other reasons. Sometimes you're selling based on price, not value. Now, what I mean by that, you're so focused on the end price and what other people are charging for, say, a pair of trousers, that you're not looking at the value of your trousers to the customer. Now, what I mean by that, you can find many pairs of trousers. If a trouser has been made in a factory, it's standardized. You can see there's this one in this size, next size, next size, next size, and so on. Now, the factory may have a lot of workers, a lot of machinery, and the end result is something quite mechanical. But your trousers, you've gone to the trouble of finding a really nice material. You're interested in sustainability, so you found one in a biodegradable fabric, or you found one that's industrial waste. And when I say industrial waste, I mean a new fabric, which is excess from the production of the factories. And you've made your trouser very carefully. You have special details, and maybe there's a different kind of pocket, or there's somewhere to hide your money, or the cut is very different. And yet you're not telling your story. You're not telling about the handcrafting. You're not telling about the person who cuts it. You're not telling about how you carefully choose so that it's in line with your values. You don't tell people that. So all they're doing is looking at your trouser next to someone else's trouser, and the price is the only thing that they can see is different because they don't know your story. So that's what I mean by selling on price, not selling on value. Because when you tell all these stories, your customers are wowed by the story. They want to be part of your story because they find it exciting. The value to them is in the details. The value to them is that it's not the same as the factory trouser. It's not the same as everyone else's. It's been made by a small business that's employing people who wouldn't normally have a job. It's being made in an environment where people feel like family. They're not stressed, and so on. What is your story? What are you saying? So when you sell on value, you're looking at your values, and you're also looking at the consumer and what is valuable to them. And you're targeting what you're selling to those people. And that's when now it's about value, it's not about price. I hope that point is clear. I can take some questions in a bit. You're bullied. Now, we've all heard about the thing of the school bully. Unfortunately, they often exist. It can also happen with clients. Your client comes in and they say, oh, but I saw this thing over there and it's cheaper, but so-and-so is selling at this price. And why are you selling at that? I know the fabric costs this. So you as a designer are getting bullied by someone who's now saying it should be cheaper because of this. And if you're not clear in your head about what your brand is about, and you find the pressure too much, you may bring your price down. And lastly, the thing I started with first, you haven't noted down your costs. And because you haven't noted down your costs, and you're doing it on memory, there are things you've forgotten. So you actually think that it's cheaper to make your product than it really is. And so your idea in your head is, oh, it only costs this, but actually it costs more. So these are very common mistakes that we as designers get affected by. And the end result is what we think our product is worth, or rather what we think our product costs to make, is not accurate. We think it's cheaper than it really is. And we can do this with the materials even before we get to labor and our own time. And that's an area which is always complicated, but already we've cheated ourselves on materials. Does anyone have a question on this so far, or is it clear? Do we have any questions on Mlabaki, or could anyone put their, if anyone has a question.
I have not cited any question in the chat box yet, but
Okay,
I'm sure questions will come in.
Good. People
I've
are
shared
saying
with you the
clear.
cost sheet on WhatsApp too.
Perfect, thank you. So let me go on to the next slide, but I will be coming back. Right, we say we all do these mistakes in the beginning. I think that's very true. The unfortunate thing is sometimes we do these mistakes even after some time because we're in a hurry and we're focused on our beautiful creation. So how do designers cheat on costing? This is the really interesting part, and you'll tell me if you think it's true for you. It is true for me. Why am I not managing? There we go. So, ways we cheat. We don't charge for our own time and effort. Hands up if you put yourself last. Hands up or a reaction. If you're the last person that gets paid, the last person that gets costed. Okay, we have a lot of you. And I'm putting my hand up because I'm often like that. That's how I know how we cheat. Right, next one. We reduce the fabric cost by not factoring in the local transport. So we send someone to check the fabrics, then we send them back to buy, and we're not thinking of the transport cost. We're just thinking of what we pay for the fabric. We're not thinking of all of that. We also forget about specific parts of the making process. So some of us pay a tailor by day, and the tailor does everything. But some of us have a tailor who does the stitching on the machine. And then we maybe have a different person who's sewing on the buttons, they're doing the ironing, things like that. They're doing the packing. And when we count the process of making, we only count the time it's with the tailor on the sewing machine. We've already forgotten the other people who we still have to pay. But we haven't added their price into the cost sheet. Now, one that a lot of people are guilty of, we use old things from the cupboard. So these old things are in our cupboard. They've been there a long time. We think, oh, good, we can use this. We can put a trim. And we don't factor in what it would cost to replace them. We don't think if we had to go to the shop now and buy them, how much would they cost? Now, if we don't do that, we've already eliminated something that should have been in the costing. And this thing of using an old price means that even if we do put a price, it's an artificial price. So these are things that I know about. If any of you know any other things, you can add them in the chat box. But these are things that mean that by the time we put in our cost, it's not accurate. So I want you to please add your questions, because this is where we're going to stop for a little bit, just so that I can speak a bit more about some of these problems. So when we ask you to really cost your price accurately, what we're trying to get is the profitability of each product you make. We're trying to look at the products you make and what you sell. What is the difference between everything you sell, all the money you're bringing in, and what it costs to make all of the products? The difference is what we call the gross profit. So it's the profit before you take off your marketing budget, before you take off just your sales staff. What exactly went into making the items, and how profitable are you before you do all of those other things? It's very important to know this, because at this stage, we can already tell if you're charging enough for your products when you sell them or not. This part of any mathematical calculation already tells you if you have a business or a hobby. A hobby is when there's no way your current business model is going to give you a proper job. You're doing it for fun, you're supplementing it from other places. Now, in the beginning, you may have to supplement from other places. In times like COVID, you may have to supplement, and so it goes on. And even in my own business, when times have been tough, that is just the reality. Sometimes the people who own the business have to put in money to now grow it again. It's natural. But if you're now a small business and you're starting out and you don't have a lot of general costs, and already when you look at that maths, what you're spending versus what you're selling, any accountant can already tell you you're selling it too cheaply. So that is a really critical area we have to look at. I want to take some questions before we go on to the next part. And if you would like to ask a question, I won't be able to take many, but if you would like to ask a question, it's best if you can type them in the chat box. If you're desperate to say something, we can maybe take one or two. Okay?
Hi, Anne. We have a
tell me.
question.
Good.
Somebody is saying that, what is the best way to respond to bullies?
I think it's a good question. So the first thing is to know that this happens and well done, because I think if you're asking that question, you are already realizing you're being bullied. So the first thing is to know how much the product really costs. Because if you know that, and you know how much you have to mark up to stay in business, then definitely it makes you stronger at saying no. So the first thing is know your business. Know how you've arrived at that price and know what the minimum you're prepared to accept is. Now, I could say to you, you calculate the price based on the cost, and after that, you just tell them, I'm not going to change it. It's fixed. But you and I live in Africa, and we know that in many countries, part of the culture is to negotiate. It's what makes the client feel happy. It's part of the conversation. And it's something that if you're not willing to do, then people aren't going to come to you because they're going to feel that you're some funny foreigner who's not willing to meet in local terms. And that's if you're a foreigner, or if you're a local who is just saying no, no, no. Now, in Kenya, you can have price tags on your clothes. If the clothes have a barcode, which make them look more official, it's usually easier for the sales team to say, no, it's a fixed price. But honestly speaking, in my experience, even with a barcode, people will still try and bully you. We do have a problem with something called secondhand clothing. Now, when I say secondhand clothing, that's also bags, belts, all of the different things you can buy in a secondhand clothing market. And why it is a problem is because usually customers may have checked also the market, or they may be aware of those prices. And those prices, you'll agree with me, at least in the case of Kenya, and I'm very sure it's the same thing all over the continent, the price of the second-hand item is it's less expensive than buying even the materials for what you make. So if I look at the price of a finished dress in the second-hand clothes market, and I look at how much it costs me to buy fabric in the fabric shop, the fabric is more expensive than the dress in the market. True? Give me a reaction if that's the same in your country. A few people are saying true. It's a real serious problem for us because it means the customer expectation is for a lower price. So they feel that we're cheating them because the finished dress is less. But that's why we need to know exactly what our inputs cost, so that when they come and bully us saying, oh, this dress costs $5 in the market, and you're selling it for $50 in your shop, or $500 if you're in high fashion, you need to be able to tell them the story. You need to be able to tell them why it's important to be able to support designer businesses and all of these other stories. Now, if you're not confident about those stories, you'll definitely be bullied. So you need to also know what's going to put you out of business. In my business, when I started, I was recording costs, sometimes accurately, sometimes not, and I was multiplying by 2. Now, at a certain point, actually, before I tell you more of this story, how many of you are multiplying by less than 2? Could you just give me a reaction? If something is costing you $5 to make, how many of you are selling it for $10 or less? Okay, so quite a lot of you. Okay, what I can tell you is you'll go out of business, and you'll go out of business because there just is not enough money in your business to feed you, feed the people you have to pay, as well as grow your business. It's just not going to work. And if on top of that, you have made a mistake in the costing, like it means like you just cannot survive. Your business is going to last a very short time. Now, when my accountants looked at the books, they told me you have to multiply by at least ×3 if you want to survive. Now, in the beginning, when you're just learning, maybe you feel you have to do ×2. If you've costed correctly and you're keeping your costs very low, maybe you're operating out of your bedroom and you're selling, I don't know how you're selling, maybe direct from your bedroom in the sense that you put it on your Instagram and you're taking it to someone's office, maybe your costs are so low that somehow you can manage. But when I explain to you the international fashion industry markups, you'll start understanding where ×3 is not a bad place to be. It's actually a very good place to be. We'll go through it slowly because it is so important. Are there any more questions on Mlabaki that I should answer right now?
Yes, we have more questions. I'm not sure we'll be able to take all, but let's take this now. Okay, this person is asking that, is there a percentage for net profit on every garment?
I mean, there's a target, but I think I first want to take you through a few more things. And I would say that in my business, I changed it a bit according to what people were prepared to pay. So I noticed that in children's wear, people don't like to pay a lot. So I've often increased on adult wear so I could reduce on children's wear. Also, there were some things that maybe could be quick sellers if the price was a little lower. And there were some things like for maybe a wedding, a special occasion, where people would naturally spend more. And so I sometimes balanced, I put a bit more here and a bit less there. It's a watching game to study your customer and understand when they're going to spend more. But first of all, you have to get the cost right, because if you don't, it means that you're not going to be able, all of these maths are still going to be wrong because the actual starting point is wrong. And if you change your markups with a wrong starting point, you're in danger of making something for free. I saw someone asking about labor. I'm about to go on to labor right now, and then we go from there. Yeah. One more question on Mlabaki?
Okay, someone is saying, how do you cost the time used in producing the product? Like, how can I price my time?
I'm going on to that now. Is there any other question on materials or reaction with consumers?
Okay, somebody is asking, how do you manage costing when you negotiate some input at lower prices than the normal price? E.g., I buy processed leather off cuts, but in case there are no off cuts, I would have to buy a whole piece at a higher price.
So honestly speaking, I would cost at a higher price because you don't know you're always going to get it at a cheaper price. If you know you're always getting at a cheaper price, no problem. But if you don't know that, cost it at the higher price. Always take the cost to be currently, the currency is not as strong as it used to be. So naturally, everything has gone up 20, 30%. So it's always safer to cost with a higher price than a lower price. Right, I'm going to go back to sharing and then we move on. Meanwhile, if there's any other questions on Mlabaki, just highlight the ones that you feel are more important and then we go through them.
Okay.
Right. Thank you. Right, so again, just a reminder, the gross profit is you take everything you've sold and you remove the costs of making the things. Now, there's a slight complication here, which is not in this slide, which I'm not going to discuss today. That is, if you have your own shop and you have stock which you have made to sell and you haven't sold it yet. So normally, if you have a shop and you have stock that's sitting there waiting for the customer, you would also work it into this formula. But for now, I'm keeping it simple. And I know you have other sessions on costing and pricing. So let's imagine we're talking about a business when you have a client that's buying, you've paid for the materials for that product, and you've sold that product. So the gross profit in this case is the money you've received less the money you've paid out. Now, someone was asking about an ideal percentage. When my gross profit was 65%, I think it was, things were flowing quite easily. If your gross profit is 50%, that means you've marked up ×2 and you've sold everything. If it's 50%, you're somehow managing. Now, if you go below 50%, you're in trouble, in my experience. Now, why I wanted to have this class today is because I see a lot of accountants who are used to selling simpler products. Imagine you're selling mobile phones. You buy it at a specific price and you sell it with a specific markup. It's a more straightforward business because you bought the mobile phone from the manufacturer. You're being charged, I don't know, you're being charged $50 and you're selling it for $70 or $80 or even $100. But usually the markup in that kind of business is smaller. But you know exactly what the costs are. Our business is, as I said in my previous class, 3 businesses. It's a design service because you're having design time, and the question is whether you're charging it. Design and sample making, which involves pattern cutting. You have a production business, a manufacturing business, because you're making the product. And if you're not making it, you're charging, someone else is charging you to make it. And then in most cases, we also have a retailing business, we're selling it. We have a shop or an online shop or an Instagram or whatever. So we also have a retail business. And all of those 3 businesses need to make a profit. So that's why I like to talk about this and not just leave it for the accountants. So your time and your effort. I had wanted to share one of your costing sheets. I think, let me share that before I go in here. Stop the share, and I'm sharing something different. Sorry, assistants on the program, I didn't pick up the costing sheet you sent me. So I'm going to share something else and get you to read it for me. Is that okay, Mlabaki?
That's fine. Thank you very much.
Okay, I hope you're able to see the thing I want you to see. Are you currently, if I write cotton, are you currently here? Can you see me having written cotton? I see heads nodding, great. So what I'm going to do is just very simply, this costing sheet, you put the manufacturing supplier. It might be your own workshop you put in-house. I'll just use this right now for my, do you have a brand name on the one you have on Labaki?
Let me check and get back to you shortly.
Okay, fine. So let me go to the fabrics. Here at the top, I've got things for a style number. Let me just put a name. I've got male, female, unisex, kids. I'll put female. Description, I'll put a straight dress. I'm just going to do this quickly so we don't waste too much time. And I'll put cotton.
So we have a brand name, Three Ladies Pirate.
I'm talking of email.
I think let me just continue so that I don't lose too much time. And then if we have a short break, I'll check. Okay. I can do it in the group afterwards with that one. So I put in the cotton. I put in the supplier. Let me just put the one of a name in Kenya of a fabric supplier. I put in the width of the fabric because if the fabric is 45 inches, now some of you say 120 centimeter, let me put both. It's important because the quantity of meters is going to change according to the width of the fabric. So just to keep it simple, I'll put in 2 meters. And I'm not putting in an M for meters because this has got a formula. And if I put in M, it's not going to do the maths. I'll show you. And then I'll put in the price. Let me put in, I can put in $5 a meter. So if you put in here in quantity, I already sent this to you. If you put in 2M, you're going to get an error. It's going to say something you don't want. So just put in the number, okay? And then it gives you a figure. I'm going to go down, I'm going to put in a zip. I'll put in a metal zip. I'm using Kenyan examples, sorry, because they come to mind quickly. The length of my zip is 20 inches. I'm sorry, I forget what that is in centimeters. It's probably about 50 centimeters. Again, I'm putting in because the price changes accordingly. I'm putting in $1. I can't remember exactly. I'm just keeping it thing. Now I've got here, let's imagine I've got a little bit of elastic on the waist because I want to make something for online. So the waist needs to be adjustable. Again, this one is going to be scooper. I'm going to put in, a meter would be a lot. Let's put in 75 centimeters. Now here I'm going to put in centimeters because most people, oops, I'll have to change this on your, I'll change it on the one that I sent you because it's formatting and it's changing and we need the exact price and we need the exact amount. I can't remember the cost. Let me put in 0.5. That would be like 50 cents. And the quantity is what I was trying to write in. 75 centimeters would be 0.75. The price, I really don't know. Let me put in 50 cents. And it will do the maths automatically. Don't write in the gray column I sent you, because if you don't write in the gray column, it will do the maths for you, okay? Now, canvas, some of you call this interfacing, some of you call it fusing. It's the thing you iron on to make the facing, like a bit more stable. Again, I'll put the same supplier. Now this one, I don't know what the width is, maybe it's 40, I really don't know. And then here, I'm going to put in a very little. I'm going to put in 10 centimeters. Now, some of you would think that's not worth counting, but actually, at the end of the day, all of these things add up. And I'm really sorry because I'm noticing, when I'm doing the total here, the sum is correct. It's in the price unit that I need to change the format. And as I said, I don't want to do it right now because it will take me slightly longer. Yeah, let me forget about changing it. Now, labels. Hands up if you have labels. Do you have a brand label? Yay, some of you have brand labels. Hands up if you use size labels. Some of you must use size labels. And some of you hopefully use wash labels. Why that's important: when you're selling in a developed market, the customer associations can remove things from the shelf if you don't have one. So please make the time and effort when you have a little bit of money, just get that label sorted. Okay. So again, I'm putting in 111, and the chances are your brand label is going to cost a little bit more than the others. I'll put it in as what will I put it in as 10 cents, and then these other ones I'll put in, I don't know. I'm just doing a bit of guesswork because sometimes my dollar translation may not be accurate. I'm just going to put that one there as well. And we at least have, let me put 1% wash label. And then lastly, packaging. Packaging bags. How many of you have packaging bags? Yeah, hands are going up. And some of you may have some other kind of packaging. You may have a sheet of tissue paper. You may have some plastic container you put things in. You may have a paper container. Where we're not allowed to use plastic, so it would be paper. And again, there's a cost. So try and work out your total cost for the packaging, and you put something in. I'm going to put in, you know, in this day and age, packaging is pretty important. So I'm going to put in even $2. Well, I put in $1.50 so you don't all get a heart attack. Right. So you can see our materials are now up to $13. Clear? So you don't write in this gray column, you write in the others, you put as much detail as possible. That means that when you need to repeat this, you know what you're doing. I want to talk to you quickly about this. Let me highlight it quickly so you can all see what I'm talking about. This. So when you make one item, your material costs are often much more than if you're making two. So if I'm doing an item for an individual client, and I'm buying the fabric for that one item because it's for my one individual client, then I price it like it's for one item. But if I'm doing production for my shop, I find maybe this straight dress, if I'm making two of them, I can get a lower amount of fabric because when I lay out the pattern on the fabric, I'm able to economize and the fabric wastage is less. Hands up if you do this, if you know how to place your, or give me a reaction if you understand what I'm talking about. You're maybe a pattern cutter and you know how to place the items so that if you're making two, that extra wastage, you're now sliding the pattern in and you're able to use less for the two. So what you then do is you calculate, if you're making two of them, how much fabric would you need? And you divide it by two. So imagine the style I'm doing, if I make two dresses, it's going to be 3 meters instead of 4. So this quantity, instead of being 2 meters, becomes 1.5. There's a box I want you to look at as well. Let me just quickly change its color. I'm going to put that box in green. So you see the box of green? Sorry, it was that we were at 2 meters. and the box of green is showing a cost of $13. Now, if I cut the 2 dresses out of fabric and reduce the wastage, then this now becomes 1.5. And so my cost goes down from $13 to $10. And why this is important, as I say, if you're in a tailoring business, it's custom made for an individual client, don't do this. The client pays for the wastage, and then you use the scraps for whatever, or you give it back to the client. But if you're doing a production for your shop, it makes sense to make 2 dresses or 3 dresses in different sizes if your quantity is now going to come down, because then your item is costing less. I hope you followed that. Any questions on this, or is it clear? Please put in the chat box if it's clear. I'm seeing a few people also in French asking about the markups. I'm going to discuss the markups later. First, I'm discussing the costs. Thank you. I think most people are saying it's clear. Okay, even in French, good, good. Okay, good. Right, let me move on. I'm going to go down to this bottom part now. So this was another easy part of the thing I shared. If you give someone in the market your item to stitch, normally they're going to give you a fixed price. So they're going to tell you, sorry, I don't know why I've got suppliers. Oh, the size was in relation to the embroidery. My embroiderer will charge different amounts depending on the size of the embroidery. And so you might have to introduce another line here. You might, if you're doing big embroidery, small embroidery, you may be charged differently. Or maybe it's all going to be one thing. So here I'm going to put in $5 for a big thing and $1 for 4 small things. Stitching, maybe you've taken it to the tailor and he's told you, okay, someone just told me they're charged $10 for something. Let me just use that as an example. And I'll put $10 and it's for one thing. That's quite a high charge. So let me put $5 because I know we're in different countries and some are cheaper than others. So I'll put in 7. There we go. And then here, just use it like, I don't know, what's the name of your tailor? Let's put in Hassan. Stitching, the size, it's not applicable. And the piece of work, we're charging $7 or we're still on a dress. Okay. So the outsourced labor cost is now here. This is, as I said, when we're doing the costing, this is an easier part of the thing. I put the outsourced labor cost in orange. If the price goes up and it's now $10, it's straight, there's no major maths on the change in Hassan's labor. And in Fred, who does our embroidery, if he now changes and puts the big one, look at the box that says 16, which is in orange. If Fred charges me $7 on the big design, it's just going up to 18. But if he now charges $2 instead of $1 on the smaller one, it goes up a lot because there's 4 small motifs. So honestly speaking, you're going to play around with these things and you're going to calculate. Your embroiderer may give everything together, as we said, that makes it easy. You may have someone doing hand painting, you may have all kinds of craft techniques. Put them here, it's easy. And then we come up to the total materials outsourced here. And I'm conscious that for some of you, you may think this is quite a high charge because it really depends on the country you're in, what the prices are. And Kenya is not one of the cheapest countries. So you may find this is much higher than you would expect. So I'm just going to not give you all a problem. I'm just going to reduce some of these things so we don't fixate on that. Yeah, let me put the small embroidery at 0.5 and the big at 1, and I'll make the cost at 6. Okay, so we now have an item which is costing us around $20. But there's a problem. And the problem, some of you asked in the chat box, and I mentioned earlier, is you. Where are you here? You're nowhere. Now, Hassan didn't think what to do for the madam. You are the designer. This is your design business. Either you designed a collection and the madam is now making one of the pieces of your collection, and that took time to develop, or you've designed for that specific lady. You've had to spend time with her, you've discussed with her, you've done some drawings, you've given it to her. So there's a whole lot of things that come in that you've done. You've had a cup of tea with her. All of that is your time making your customer happy. And it should not be free time. Okay? The tea is part of your marketing budget. You may have a sales assistant. They're also part of the marketing and sales budget. They don't come into the actual cost of the garment. But what we're talking about now is actually you yourself and where do we put this cost. So I wanted to do this together with you. I'm going to now share something different and we're going to try and do it together. So there was a question I had asked in your WhatsApp. I don't know if we got any answers or if I forgot to ask it, which is, if you were to hire a designer, how much would they want to be paid per month? If you were to hire a designer, how much would they want to be paid per month? Someone can write that in the chat box. Maybe Omlabaki, you can help me. So you're in different countries, and that designer will have a very different expectation. I'm seeing somebody talking about 200 USD, someone else talking about 700 USD. It's easier for me to have everybody say the amount of money in USD, please, just because we're in so many countries. And we've even got someone down at 150. So I'm going to choose an amount that makes the maths easy. So I'm going to choose, let me choose 500 as an amount of money that actually, in a way, goes together with how much would a tailor want to be paid. So in your country, how much would a good tailor want to be paid a month if they were coming to your workshop and working every day? They're not being paid per item, being paid a monthly sum for their work. If they only are charging per piece, think what they would be happy to take home per month. So I know there's a 400 from Ethiopia, there's a 300 from Northando, I'm not sure which country. It will help if you put in the country for me. And of course, within the country, it varies. I saw somebody saying $200 in Mombasa, and I know in Nairobi, a good tailor is probably wanting 350 to 400. Someone else, tailor 350, Namibia, Botswana 600 is higher, 100 in Lagos. We're going to know where we want to hire our tailors next, 300 Rwanda. Good. So let's say we have a range of around $200 to even $500 for the tailor. So the designer cannot have the same rate as the tailor. The designer, one would assume, is going to be paid more than the tailor. So if we're taking an average of, let me say $300 for the tailor, I will take pattern cutter. Does anyone in their country hire a pattern cutter? If you hired a pattern cutter per month, how much would they get paid? I'm looking at the chat box, if anyone's got a pattern cutter. Okay, so Zimbabwe, somebody's got one on 400. I doubt a pattern cutter would take 100 unless it's by design. So when you know how much a pattern cutter would charge per design, which might be $100, just imagine how many designs they're going to want per month and how much that will end up being. In some countries, pattern cutters are paid more than designers purely because nobody wants to do that job or there aren't enough of them and so on. So a good pattern cutter is essential in a lot of businesses so they get more. But for now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, let's say the tailor is 200, the pattern cutter 300, and the designer 500, just for the sake of argument. So we're going to go back. I'm going to share something and we'll calculate this together. I hope you're not all exhausted by this thought. And, oh, I've shared the wrong thing perhaps. Let me see. Let me just get rid of that. Sorry, I need to stop shares so that I can control. Sorry. I'm going to do it practically with you first. And when I've done it, I'll go back to my presentation. Right. I'm talking to myself, but I'm coming. Here we go. Right. So now you should see a screen with, it's the same kind of costing sheet. What I'm going to do to make our life a little bit simpler, I'm just going to put in the material cost. I think we had a summary of around $10 for the dress we were making. So I'm just going to put it up here. I'm going to put a straight dress. And I'm going to keep it at the total we had on the materials, not on the labor. So I'm going to remove, actually, no, let me leave the outsourced labor. I think our outsourced labor. We had it at 15. I'm going to remove this other stuff to keep it simple. I think I have put it as orange. Okay, excuse me. So I want to go into how we're going to calculate this hourly rate. And I'm going to share this costing sheet with you after. I didn't send it initially because I thought it might be a bit complicated to understand without doing materials first. So we're going to assume that the design was easy. I want to discuss a bit later how I would work out the cost of a collection. But for now, let's just work with this thing of designing for the madame who maybe, you know, she's commissioned you to make something. And what you're doing is you're taking an existing thing and you're changing it into something that she would like. So you're not spending a lot of time, but you do have to do the drawing. So I'm going to put it in light purple, and you can see 3 hours. So to work out the hourly rate, I'm going to take a little box down here, and we're going to do a bit of maths. So we're going to imagine that you want $500 a month. We've said 500. This is your monthly target, which for many countries is very low, but we're just keeping it like that because we've got all kinds of people, all kinds of economies here. So you want $500 a month. So let's average it to 4 weeks in the year. So we'll put in that you've got 4 weeks in the year. I'm keeping the maths more simple, right? And in the hours per week, we're going to stick on a very nice number of hours per week. Now, some countries, developed markets, they talk about 35 hours, some countries 40 hours, and some countries are even 50. So I'm going to put in 40. And I'm going to highlight these boxes so that we know what everybody's looking in the same direction. What color can I make it now? I'll just do yellow again because it's easy to see. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to divide the monthly amount by, first I'll divide it by the number of weeks, and then I'll be dividing it by the numbers of hours. So I'm going to take the 500, I'm dividing it by the number of weeks, and I'm dividing it by the number of hours. And I'm getting to $3 an hour. Okay? Now, as I said, some of you will be horrified and some of you will think it's a lot. If I change your salary and I say you're going to earn $1,000 a month, this box now comes down to $6 an hour. So if you change this box, the amount changes. You want $800 a month, the hourly rate is $5. But I'm staying on 500 for now. So at the end of the day, let me just say, it doesn't mean that you are definitely getting paid $500 a month. What it does mean is you've allocated something to the cost of your garment, which respects your time and effort, and the customer has something added in there which is unique to you. So your hourly rate is what we've calculated here. And you'll see the box at the end. Let me put it in yellow as well. So if you please can look at, let me remove the fill for a minute. Okay. So I want, there's 2 yellow boxes over there. I'm putting this in bold so it's easier to see. And you'll notice if I change the designer's monthly salary to 1,000, you'll notice that over here, it has gone to 18, which is double, right? If I make it 500, then it's gone to 9.38. So all of the maths, I'm going to cross-check before I send it to you. The formulas are already here. Let's do quickly the pattern and grading. So the pattern and grading, I had put, let me put a green here. Oops. So the pattern and grading, I'd put average, because you'll agree that sometimes you can have a simple design. It's simple because you already designed it. You're just making a variation. But the pattern cutting, because it's now for this lady, it has to be done specifically for Madame. That means you have to spend time on it and getting it right. So the pattern cutting, I've put at 6. The hourly rate, I'm going to do the same method down here. I'm going to just put the numbers in to make it faster. We've said it's 40 sorry, it's 4 weeks in the month, it's 40 hours, and I'm doing the maths to divide 300 by 4 weeks by 40 hours. And I'm coming up with this amount. Okay. It's so again, it's automatically done the maths for me. If you look in the column that's green, you'll notice that the maths for the designer, for the pattern cutter, the pattern cutter's amount is higher than the designer's because there's more hours involved. And I hope I haven't done some wrong maths here. It looks like I have, sorry. Sorry, guys, let me just change that. Nothing like showing your students the wrong thing. Let me move this up. Actually, I'm just going to have to. Yeah, and this one I'll just delete for now. So I've now shown you the right thing. Sorry about the thing. So now I'm going to show you something very interesting. So you see, you have the pattern cutter is actually earning more on this garment than the designer because of the number of hours involved, even though it's on a lower salary. And the design cost is currently at 20. And that one, I'm running out of colors here. Let me put it there. So we're looking at this orangey box, which is 20. But there is something else which can change things. So if you now decide to make more items and the design cost is now the same, and the pattern cutter, instead of making for the individual, is making for a number of sizes, things start to change. And the cost that you thought was high for yourself and the pattern cutter actually isn't. It's completely affordable. So any questions, first of all, on how I calculated the pattern cutter and the designer? Omlabaki, have we got any questions before I proceed?
Yes, we have.
Tell
Let
me.
me, okay. This question is, can the purchase volume compensate for bad pricing? I mean, if the turnover is constantly progressive and sufficient, that can compensate.
I don't understand the question. Although, just repeat it for me, please.
Can't the purchase volume compensate for bad pricing? I mean, if the turnover is constantly progressive and sufficient, that can compensate. I guess the person is saying the price volume can compensate for bad pricing. Can it compensate for bad pricing? The purchase volume.
The volume can make the situation worse or better. Meaning, if you choose a business model that is high volume, low price, that can work. High volume, high price, of course, works better. But the key thing is, have you costed correctly? Because if you have not costed correctly and the volume is more, the mistake is more. So it goes back to, you must have accurate costing before you decide the business model of higher markup or lower markup. Okay. We're about to get on to all of that stuff. I see we've only got 15 minutes, so I need to speed up. I just wanted this to be very clear. Let me go back to this while you check any more questions for the future.
Okay,
So
there's a question here.
Yeah, one more, and then I want to show this so I can carry on with the presentation.
Okay, this is about e-commerce. How
No,
about Okay,
Okay, I'll look at that later.
okay,
So now, everybody, I want you to look very carefully at the yellow boxes. The yellow box, I'm turning this one yellow as well. So what I want you to think about is, yes, if you're making one sample or one lady's dress only, when you now have to put all of your design cost and pattern cutting cost on one piece, it's quite expensive. But if I go up to this top left box and we decide that instead of making one, we know we're going to make 10. So we make one sample, but all of this design and pattern cutting costs get spread across 10 of them. Look what happens. Do you see this final cost? It's gone from being $9.40, $11.30 to 0.94 and 1.13, because the cost of the design work, the cost of the pattern cutting is now being spread across like 10 pieces instead of just one piece. So if you look at the orange box again, the design cost here is now $2. And I haven't reduced how much you're getting paid. I've just counted 10 instead of 1. Look, I change it to 1 and the design cost is $20. I put it as 10, it's now $2. So the effect on your end price is very astonishing. We're going to go to the total production cost. I'm now running out of colors because I've made it so multicolor. Let me put this box in purple. So look at the purple box again. This is the total production cost. It's at $27 if it's 10. If it's 1, it's at $45. So how many you make of this one item, it affects the real price a lot. If you're making for the madame, fine, it's 1. If you're making for your shop, it's much less. Let's see what happens if we make 5 of them. The price is now 29. That's the cost. If we make 50 of them, it's 25. If we make 10 of them, and then I'm switching to something else. So there's not a lot of difference between making 10 of them and making 50 as regards the end cost. If we make 5, again, okay, but 5, there's a bit more of a difference. But when you are making designing a new item, making a pattern for a new item, if you can aim to be making 10 in its lifetime, you can actually cover your costs. Your costs, the pattern cutter costs, you need to put yourself in to the expenses. I'm going to share this afterwards, and I hope you'll agree with me. In terms of the markup, here we go with markups. Wholesale prices and retail prices. You mark up ×2 to wholesale, you get $54. You mark up 2 again to retail, you get $100. If you change this and you make it like 1.5 and you make it again 1.5, you're selling it at $61 instead of what I'm recommending, 2 and then 2 again. But whatever you do, you now have seen this 27 and you know that you've already put something in for yourself. You put something in for this whole process. You've respected yourself and your work. That is really important also when you're now being bullied, when you're now being pushed around, that Matumba or second. Someone is talking. I think Omlabaki, maybe put yourself on mute. I'm not sure. So we don't have a lot more time, but we have taken questions as we've gone along. so we can shorten that time. I want to go back to the PowerPoint, which I hope will now be easier to understand because of doing all of this. Let me bring it up on my screen. Yeah. It should be now like a bit of revision. So, yeah, here we go. And if I can put it back on SlideShare, you've all gone down to the bottom of my screen. There we go. Right, so labor costs. Designer and owner of the business, you cost your time according to the job you're doing. So if you're sewing on a machine, you get the tailor salary. If you're cutting the cloth, you're on your head tailor rates. If you're pattern cutting, it's the pattern cutter rates. And if you're designing, it's the designer rates. You don't use a designer's salary if you're sitting on a sewing machine. So you imagine your business getting bigger. You have all of these positions. How much would you be paying for those positions? And you work out your contribution according to that salary, not your dream salary. Okay? Then, how long does it take to design? So sometimes I look at it as how long does it take to design the whole collection? Because maybe you put aside a season, you're designing 5 looks, 10 looks, 20 looks, whatever you're doing, you put aside time and you know that you're going to take 1 week, 2 weeks, a month to design the collection and to make the prototypes and then change them and so on. All of this is design development. And I'm going to share this rather than explain it now because I don't want to saturate you. But basically within that time frame, if you've designed 10 things over a 2-week period or even a month period, working full time, you allocate the total, you split it by the number of designs. So if you're charging $1,000 to design a collection and you're designing 20 items within that collection, you take your $1,000 and you divide it by 20. That gets you $50, right? Now, if you have that amount of money and you say, okay, in the lifetime of that design, I'm not just going to sell 1 dress of that style, I'm going to sell 10 of them. So instead of charging $50 for that 1 dress design, you're now charging $5 because you're making 10 of them. And so the charge you have for that dress within the collection is divided by the number you're going to be making. I feel it's a lot to take in, and we're going to share this afterwards, and I'll answer questions more specifically. Right, let me find the next one.
Okay, there's a question here that I would like us to answer. And the question is, what about fixed indirect cost? If you are the one producing, I mean electricity, taxes.
No, sorry, Olabaki, I don't want to answer that right now. It's more important to understand this, and then I'll come back on that. The
Okay.
only questions I want right now are to do with labor on the costing. Okay?
Okay.
Thank you. Now, piecework, that's when your worker is paid per piece. It's very easy for a costing because you agree with the tailor, you're going to pay this much per piece. The only thing is that to get a better costing, you would negotiate. So you say to them, if you're going to make 10 of them, you need to bring the price down. And that's because they get used to doing it and they can do it faster. But with piecework, always make sure that the quality is correct and you're sending back anything that's not done properly. The hourly rate, if you're using workers, I am going to share this presentation afterwards so you can look at it again. Number 1, you take the monthly salary and remember to include, if you're giving them lunch, if you're giving them tea, if you're paying any insurance, if you're paying any transport, all of that becomes part of what you pay them per month. That's a direct cost on your business and on your product. It's what it costs to make the thing. You divide it again by 4 to get a weekly rate, and then by the number of hours to get an hourly rate. Then you work out how many hours it takes to make something. You need to time your production. The more detailed, the better. How long does it take to make a pattern? How long does it take to put the pattern on the cloth? If you're able to buy a cutting machine, for me, that's one of the best investments on a small business, because you can cut things in layers. So if you have a business where you're making uniforms, you cut many at the same time of the same size. If you have a shop where you're, say, making 3 straight dresses and they all have different necklines, but the rest is the same, you can cut them out together, and then all you do is change the neckline. It's very simple. It makes a big difference. How long does it take to stitch on a machine? So the first time someone stitches something, it's going to take longer because they're learning. The more they make the same, the faster it's going to get. So know your business and be there with a timer. Check. So you can check when they're doing the sample, but they're going to make mistakes. Check when they've done a few of them and get the speed. And then look at how long does it take to clean the item, iron it, pack it. All of these are costs you have to cover. Now, this slide has a thing saying competitors. I don't believe in competitors. I think everybody has a unique business. You may be having a competitor if you're talking about manufacturing. So for manufacturing, you do have competitors. So the people that are getting out the same quality, maybe faster than you or slower than you, and as a result, they're cheaper than you or whatever. But as a designer, please find your own unique thing that stands apart, which means you don't have to take this into account. You do have to look at the value to the customer. You do have to look at the costs, but on the design side, I'm not worried about the competition. Make 10, the actual design element does not cost much when it's spread across many items. When it's your manufacturing business, yes, you have a competitor. Are you making it in your own workshop, or are you better to take it to the tailor in the market who pays for their own electricity, rent, and so on? Those costs, by the way, that was a question that came up. Those costs are covered in your markup, if you mark up properly. If you don't mark up properly, yes, you can look at, you make 100 items a month, and this is the cost of your rent, your electricity, and so on. So you take those fixed costs, maybe they're saying $300, and you're making 100 items a month. So you take your $300 and you divide by 100 items. If you're paying $300 and you're making 30 items in the month, then you divide by 30. So 300 divided by 30 would now be $10. So that is a very expensive cost to add directly on the product. So I think costing is always, there are a few choices to make, but if you're only making 30 and you're spending $300, I would suggest you move to cheaper place, make it at home, in your garage, in your bedroom, wherever, but put your costs down, please. Fabric costs, you need to record how many meters each style takes. We've said you should always, for the cost, look at it being higher rather than lower. If you're offering small, medium, large, maybe large is going to take more fabric, so you use the large to calculate it. And if you're using a print, the print has to be matched. So you need to use extra fabric to match the stripes or the designs. So that means you're having to buy extra fabric, cost extra fabric to match. But the match is the value. If you now make things that are not matching, you cannot charge a good amount for your end product. I spoke about that at the beginning. Remember the transport to and from the shop, or even the time if it's one of your employees. So add those into the fabric costs. If you're importing, remember to add in the customs, the duty, everything. And remember in your fabric costs, if you're buying many meters at the same time, you're spreading the transport cost across many meters. If you're buying 30 meters, the cost of the person going and coming with it is the same as if you're buying 1 meter. So think about it and plan when you send somebody. Choose 1 or 2 days a week when you send someone to the market. Don't send them every day. We've also looked at this, the quantity of the orders. If you're buying materials for 10 shirts or you're buying it for 1 shirt, the cost of going to buy them is the same. So is it 1 shirt that's going to have all of those costs, or can you spread it across 10? Plan your time, plan your workers' time. Make sure that the journey is worth it. Now, I mentioned this before, it's important. Don't base your production cost on your sample cost, because you're going to make 10 of them or 50 of them. The first sample is expensive. And what you can do is take what it costs and spread it across your production so that it's covered, but the end result on the garment is not too much for your customers to bear. Labaki, I've got a few more slides to cover. Do I have to finish now, or I can go on a little bit?
You can go on, if we can spare extra 5 minutes for you to wrap up.
So now the business types, this has a bearing on what your prices are. A tailoring business is a service. So the client brings the fabric and the tailor charges a rate for the labor. And the tailor will be chosen by the client based on the quality of their cut, the stitching, and the personal relationship. Maybe the person you go to see sits down, has a chat, which you like. Maybe you're someone busy, you don't want to have a chat, you prefer somebody that has another approach. That's how you choose your tailor. So a tailor, it's about the labor charge. And in many ways, a tailor does have competitors. They're a manufacturer. They show value by how they treat their customers, but assuming that the quality is the same, there will be others that compete. So look at how you make your service different, what puts the customer smile on their face. So do everything there so that you can charge extra because of the experience. And look at adding in textiles that you can sell for a profit. If you can charge ×2, so much the better. You've chosen them, that takes time, you've got them to your place. Now, private label manufacturing is when you stitch for other people, but it doesn't have your label on it. Then again, you have competitors because you are a manufacturer. The client is giving you the fabric and you are now doing the stitching. So again, it's a service. It's about how efficient you are, how good your communication is, and you're being compared to other factories, being compared in terms of quality and price. If your quality is fantastic, then someone will pay more for it because they know that they can rely on you. Also, when I say rely, don't lie to your customers. Give them an accurate estimation of time and add a few extra days just for comfort. Then there's the fashion designer business, which I've talked about it before, where you have 3 businesses. You have a design studio, which is the intellectual property part of the business, which charges design fees. It may charge, there may be PR services there, marketing, how you do your digital marketing and so on. Those are the costs you need to cover. And the design charges we've discussed just now. Manufacturing, you sell wholesale. So you're not selling 111, you're selling 10 or 50 or 100 and so on. And retail is when you now sell to the public and you're selling one item to one consumer. Hopefully you're selling many to the same consumer, but you're planning as if it's 111. And lastly, I wanted to show you what global fashion markups are, so you can understand what's at stake when you see a high price ticket. Why is it so high? Sometimes we don't understand because no one shares it with us. So we've got the different business models. We've got high price, high volume. That is a brilliant business. High price, low volume. That is a viable business. It's like a designer who doesn't have a lot of investment behind them, but they're managing to make it because they've got a good markup. You've got low price, high volume. That is good for someone who's not maybe so much of a designer as a really good fashion entrepreneur or buyer who can see something that they know is going to sell. They change it a little bit and then they churn it out quickly. It involves less research and development, and so they can make things faster than a designer who's putting in their soul and doing an artistic collection and presentation, which takes a lot of effort. And then low price, low volume, please go out, just forget about it. It's not worth it. You'll go out of business, it just doesn't work. And when you're starting, you must have few overheads, keep your rent low, your employees low, so you're flexible. If you can do piecework and just take tailors when you need them, fantastic. And then as you grow, you can put your prices up so that you can build your business, because it's not always easy for us to get external finance. So we have fast fashion brands. I used to work in one, and that one was Mango. And when I worked with them, they were marking up times 5.5, not 2.5. It was 5.5 from China. So whatever it was costing in China, by the time it ended up on the shelf in Spain to be sold, it was multiplied by 5.5. I've done some Googling right now. Landed cost, that means after paying for shipping from wherever. Some are 2.5, some of them are more. But to get their prices as low as they are, they now do huge volumes so that they can negotiate the textile costs and push the suppliers to go lower, lower, lower. And the same on the wages. Some of you have read about the scandals to do with wages, occasionally child labor, but also just low paid, where people are desperate for work, so they're doing it even though they can't make a living wage. So some of these brands do that, but one way or another, it's a volume-based model. When you're making 1 or 10 or 100, this is not for you. You have to be doing real volume, like thousands, to be able to have that real negotiating power. Then designer fashion. So let's take a little bit of time. The traditional business model internationally. You do your complete costing, including something for yourself that I've just showed you how to do. And then you times it by 2.5 to get the wholesale price that you sell to a shop. Imagine you're selling into London or Paris or New York or wherever. You sell to the shop, the cost times 2.5. And then they are going to mark up times 3, times 3.5, or so on. So what that means is by the time you've sold to them, and they've now made their markups to sell to the public, it's a markup of 7.5. Something you've sold, something that has cost you $10, you now sell at $25. You sell 10 pieces or 100 pieces or 50 pieces, whatever. The shop imports it, they pay for the shipping and duty, and then they sell it at $75. So now when they have a sale at 50% off at $35, they're still making something, or at least covering their costs. So the whole international fashion system works on this kind of model. So when you go online and you see the prices of what they are, this is why they're what they are. And so for a designer in Africa who's selling internationally designer fashion, This is how the end price is arrived at. And then sometimes in their home markets, like us in our home market, we give 20 to 30% off. I think Tebi Magugu is also doing that from what I've heard, because it makes it very difficult to sell in your own local market because it's just too much. So what I usually advise people to work towards, try to work towards a ×4 markup. And if you're paying VAT and so on, try to work towards a ×5 markup. People who are selling your product, if you're selling to shops, do not want you to be selling cheaper because it undermines the price they're selling at and they do have to make their profit. So if they're making their profit in where we are in Kenya, most retail shops are marking up ×2. But as a designer business, you still need to make your money. So you also are going to want to do minimum ×2 if it's wholesale. That means if you're selling direct to the consumer, I repeat, you're marking up ×4. So if you're a designer currently selling at ×2 to your public, please try and put it up. Let me now, I'm going to stop sharing and I'm just going to give you a last impassioned plea. So do your costing right, number one, and include something for the pattern cutter and the designer. Then make sure that minimum you're marking up ×2, minimum. If you're already working ×2, move to ×3, selling direct to the public. And now, as you work on getting retailers to sell for you, you know you're going to work towards ×4 from cost. ×2 to the retailer, who's then going to sell ×2 to the public. So that means you to the public are selling ×4, so that when you take this thing out and you put your Instagram on and you say what the price is, you're not half the price of the person who's selling from you. You're selling at the same price, unless you've got a sale on. So I hope it's been helpful. I really know that I've rushed you through the rest of the presentation. It will be shared. Please look at it carefully. Please try to do the Excel costing I have sent you. Practice it. You're going to go wrong. You're going to make mistakes. Maybe I made a mistake on the maths. We'll get an accountant to check it before we share it with you. Just try. And then pricing is politics. You can sell if you're adding the value, if you're explaining your story like a politician does, then you can sell for anything because people they bought your dream. They really want it, and then you can sell it anything. If you're just throwing it on the shelf, badly presented, your sales staff have no clue what they're talking about, then you're not going to sell it even at a low price. Okay? So make the effort as a design business to put in the groundwork, get your story right, train your staff right, cost it right, do the maths right, and everything will flow from there. I hope it's been helpful. And we will answer questions. Do like last time, put your questions together. Then we'll do a Google Doc and I'll try to the best of my ability to answer. Thank you for the time. Omlobaki, do I need to?
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. And it was such a very, very insightful session. I'm sure the comment has been buzzing, chat box has been buzzing with a lot of comments saying how amazing you are. And at this junction, we are going to be calling today's session a day. And I will just implore you, if you have any questions, please send your questions to Fashionomics Help Desk at cchubnigeria.com. I'll be more than happy to take your questions. And this is also a reminder to inform you that tomorrow is Founders Day. It's starting at 11 a.m. WAT. Not worries, we'll send to you the different time zones so that you can keep abreast of your time at your own end. So if you have any questions, once more, please send your questions to Fashionomics Help Desk at cchubnigeria.com. I'll be more than happy to take them. Thank you very much and cheers. See you. tomorrow.
Bye, everyone.